It's summer. It's summertime. I've got Paul Rieckhoff, one of my favorite people, really good friend of mine. It's always great to see you and have you on the podcast, and we can catch up and talk for hours. But first, I have a long list of serious issues to get with you, but I'll start with a light one. Where are you as a grown man with young kids on cargo shorts?
Oh, for the kids, absolutely.
No. For you.
Oh, for me.
Sorry.
So I've evolved.
Yeah.
I've evolved. Cargo shorts are too bulky for me.
Yes.
And as a guy who wore them in the military, they're always getting caught on stuff. And as a father of a 5 and 2 year old, I'm always jumping in and out of the car more than I did out of a Humvee in the Army. And cargo shorts get caught on all kinds of shit. So I have bought the most amazing pair of shorts called Cool Shorts, Kuhl. It's an American company out of the Rockies.
I have their pants.
I buy all their shit. Like I'm wearing them right now. I don't know if you can see them.
Oh,
they have these. They have these little pockets on the side where you can also put a mask in, which was really convenient during COVID time. Well, I guess we're still in COVID time. And they're stretchy and they dry quickly if you get them wet or your kid pukes on you or whatever else. So I'm all about cargo shorts, especially after today is the first day of camp for my 5-year-old. And Friday was the last day of kindergarten, which was highlighted by 2 stitches. An hour before the end of kindergarten, the school called and said, you got to come pick him up. He busted his chin open. He needs stitches. I said, can he stay one more hour? I don't want him to miss the last hour of school. He wanted to stay. He ended up staying, and I know you'll appreciate this. He was a champ. We got stitches on the way to going to Watkins Glen, and we spent the weekend at Watkins Glen watching the races, which I highly recommend for an amazing family experience for everyone. Watkins Glen Racetrack up in the Finger Lakes of New York. You said you've been there before. That's why I also mentioned it.
My dad brought me there when I was a little boy, and I watched actor Paul Newman race. It was the first famous person I ever saw in person. And my dad, who's now, I think, 75, was at Watkins Glen with you and your kids. He was there at the same time.
Oh!
And my dad is an instructor. He teaches driving on that track for, I guess, affluent guys who have like Porsches and BMWs and Corvettes and whatever. My dad like goes in their cars with them and teaches them. So yeah, I know all about it. And I think it's a great thing to bring your kids to and introduce, I'm not a huge auto racing fan as an adult, but I think I could get back into it. I've gotten a little bit interested.
It's beautiful. And it's on the lakes. If you've never driven upstate New York, this is my sales pitch for upstate New York. The drive across 17 out west is one of the prettiest drives I've ever been on. I've driven in Europe and all around the world. And one of my dad points I got to get. Through a friend, we got to hook up. I drove my SUV on the track for 3 laps with my wife in the passenger seat and 2 kids in car seats. So I don't know if anybody's ever driven Watkins Glen at almost 100 miles an hour in an SUV with 2 car seats, but we did it to celebrate my son's kindergarten. So happy summer, Pete. Great to be back with you. Get out, everybody. Even if you're not race fans, get in a car, take the car seats, drive on a racetrack. Summer's here.
One more parenting question, because I did see you tweet, and I thought this would be a good perspective to get. You mentioned a couple times your son just finished kindergarten. You also mentioned on Twitter how hard it was to have your first year of school be in the pandemic. So just a question about what that was like for him, what it's like for you, what you think he missed. And obviously, I'm sure you want to give credit to the teacher, because I can't imagine what that must have been like.
My 5-year-old son's my fucking hero. Okay, like imagine a situation where he thinks he might die. He's 5 years old. His friends all think they might die. His first day of school, mask up, get screened, go into this place that looks like a fortress. He had never been inside the school before, and graduation was Friday. I have still never been inside his school, which is kind of daunting for me, not just in the age of COVID, but in the age of school shootings, right? I've never set foot inside my kid's school, which is a little bit crazy for me. But I think he was heroic. I think that he was in a public school where they had so little resources, and you really felt it around like art. They had one social worker for the whole damn elementary school, and this woman is a saint. They went through 2 principals. They had these teachers that were just getting ground into the ground with changes in regulations. But COVID is especially hard for kindergartners, because you're supposed to run around and have fun and hug and play, and they've been told for a whole year to stay in a box, wear a mask, don't touch anything or anybody for basically a year. But they came through it. He's heroic. I really think that they deserve a lot of credit, this generation of kids, but also the educators. I got no time for anybody who's hating on educators. I think if you're hating on educators, it's worse than hating on the troops. And it means you hate America, because what they've gone through is unbelievable. And I really think that when we talk about heroes and helpers, the educators deserve it after this last year. I don't know how they did it.
Well said. Walk a day in their shoes, and then you can criticize them, which can actually is a great segue, Paul, to my first question. I think I reached out to you for a couple of reasons, a bunch of things I wanted to talk about, but I was just like kind of stunned by Matt Gaetz questioning the Secretary of Defense and the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs at the Armed Services Committee hearing. The fact that he's even there, getting the opportunity to speak to folks like these guys is one thing because of who he is, but more importantly, what he asked. And then I was even more stunned, to be honest with you, with the take of one of the most powerful people in conservative or Trump media, which is Tucker Carlson, going off on him, I think a few nights during his program last week and saying he wasn't brave, called him a pig. And it's just that kind of disrespect being paid to those kind of men from people on the right in Congress and media. How is that seen by even conservative members of the military? I mean, saying that you're not brave, even though I've never done what you've done, no matter what the job is, it's so weak. What are your thoughts on that? I know they don't.
I think cowardice and treasonous behavior and selfishness transcends party. And I think everyone who is objective, no matter where you come from or who you vote for, can realize that in the last couple of years, what has developed is really a political domestic terrorist group. Okay. And it spans parts of the conservative media, parts of the talking head community and the punditry, and parts of Congress. So it goes from Matt Gaetz all the way to Laura Ingraham and many people in between, who now put themselves and their personal and political agendas, which are often intertwined, really their personal agendas, their personal wealth, power, influence, ahead of the best interests of our entire country. And, this is the extension of the attacks on teachers, the extension of the attacks on Dr. Fauci. And now they are attacking the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, calling him a pig, calling him a coward, questioning his integrity, also coming after the Secretary of Defense, who, by the way, is the first Black Secretary of Defense in history. And there are huge racial undertones here. So you've got somebody like Matt Gaetz, who, in my view, has no honor, has no integrity, is a coward, and should be in jail, right? Who's standing in front of the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, who went to Princeton, who has multiple combat tours, and he's lecturing him on America. This is bullshit, and it's performance, and that's what it should be called out for. It's performance. It's performance for themselves and for their narrow political agendas. It's for clicks. They want us to be talking about it right now, which kind of is why I'm careful about it. Before we came on, we said, oh, why is Dan Crenshaw trending? Because Dan Crenshaw knows how to play this game. He's very good at it. Yeah. Right? He's saying we should ban a person from the Olympic team who won't stand for the flag. He knows he's going to get on Fox. He knows you're going to talk about it. MSNBC talks about it. And it becomes this really damaging cycle where we're not talking about the attacks on Syria that happened last night. We're not talking about cyber attacks. And that's where I think it's most damaging, because it's dividing our country. And I've said this to you before on many other topics. Our enemies are celebrating. Osama bin Laden would love to see members of Congress attacking the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Osama bin Laden would love to see a major news network saying the military, it needs to be defunded. I mean, this is our terrorist dream to see this the way this is developed. And I got to call out the Democrats too, because they're not really great at pushing back here, right? Like, who is fighting back against Dan Crenshaw? Chris Hayes or Rachel Maddow or you or me, right? Like, there needs to be a coordinated, focused effort that transcends party lines and says, stop this shit. Cut it out. This is our military. They're doing the right thing. Take your political agenda elsewhere. And this is what damn Joe McCarthy. When Joe McCarthy did the communist push, right? He went after the military, and that was the third rail that sunk Joe McCarthy. And I think in many ways this is going to sink definitely the Republican Party.
I don't know the history of that, and I hope you're right that it will sink the Republican Party as it is today. But that's interesting.
He said there are communists in the military, communists in the army.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
And that's the when you've gone too far. And I really think that's the important political dynamic here, Pete. My show is Independent Americans. We've debated and talked about that before. Moderate Republicans are running away from the party in droves. Independents are running away in droves. Nobody wants to be a part of this, and it's the Republican equivalent of the Democrats defund the police. Right? Well, this is going to hurt them very badly, and it's going to move more people toward the middle.
I hope you're right about that in terms of messaging. I think you make a lot of good points there. But you're also right about just in terms of what they want and how you control the message and how you throw some red meat out, and then we all pick up on it and it gets trending and so on, and how we should be more focused on other things. And so I like to think that I've got, say, 20 minutes with you today, and we've talked about just the way that they've gotten away with those types of criticisms of actual serving military members, from Tucker and Matt Gaetz to Laura Ingraham, who brought you up on her show the other day, which must have been fun. But there are
Can I talk on that for a second, Pete? Because I think it's important.
Yeah, but I just wanted to say I've got Afghanistan departure, which you can talk about, suicides, burn pits, and you mentioned and added to my list the strikes on the border of Syria, Iran. So start, though. Those are the things that I hope to get to with you if time allows. So yeah. Please.
This is a playbook, right? And Fox News, the right-wing media, members of the radical fringe of the GOP, which is becoming more and more the dominant part of this party. This is a playbook. They're pulling the Fauci playbook off the shelf, and now they're going to put it on General Milley. They're coming after General Milley. He's going to be enemy number one. They're leading their A-block segments with it. They start with one show, right, with Laura Ingraham or with Tucker, and then they expand across the whole network, and they kind of market test it to see how it's going to do, right? And it is red meat, but they're very careful. Like Laura Ingraham, for example, uses a clip of me on Nicole Wallace. Yeah. But she doesn't mention Nicole Wallace, and she doesn't mention my name because she actually doesn't want to elevate us, because she knows it'll get us more Twitter followers. It'll get us a following. So she very carefully uses the image of us or who we are, and only seldom do they come directly after someone, which she did against Malcolm Nance very recently, which was very racialized. A lot of pictures of Malcolm looking scary, not saying he had been in the military, very carefully playing on those different levers of racism, of fear, of class of warfare. But what they're doing is a strategy. And I want people to know that. Watch the playbook. They do it over and over again. And General Milley is the new Dr. Fauci. And they're going to amp it up until they try to hurt General Milley. And that hurts our national security. He has to deal with this bullshit, right, on the Monday when Biden called strikes into Syria. So it wasn't just the border. 2 strikes were in Syria. So, hey, America, you may not know it. There was no declaration of war. There was no public debate. Congress didn't take this up. But we are at war with Syria. We fired strikes into Syria while you were at the beach this weekend or watching the playoffs. That's what happened this weekend.
All right. Well, I'm glad you mentioned that. I saw Chris Murphy's tweet about that. This is always a question about getting congressional approval, thus getting the American public's approval before you launch missiles into another country, regardless of what country it is. And I take your point to the framing. It's really very insightful, and I appreciate it a lot. I do want to ask you, though, about what underpinned the criticisms, because, I love listening to your podcast. I mean, you and I have been friends for a long time. I've always admired you and your thoughts on things, which is why I'm glad to get them here. And I love following you on Twitter. And I saw you share this 10-point argument from a professor about why inclusion and diversity in the military throughout history have really mattered. And it was so interesting. But from your point of view, this criticism of talking about, people are conflating radical critical race theory. Never get it with just like inclusion, diversity, welcoming Black people, Hispanic people, gay people, always of which you've been a champion of since you've been in the military, and I think probably increasingly with 21st century veterans of the Iraq and Afghanistan era. Why is it important, though, Paul Rieckhoff? Why is diversity of gender, sexual orientation, race, ethnicity, religion, why is that important for any reason in the military?
Because the military is a reflection of our society. The military should be drawn from all aspects of our society, and it should fight for all aspects of our society that are peaceful and thoughtful and American, right? And the idea that now letting in trans people is going to destroy the military, or letting women do jobs they shouldn't do is going to destroy the military, or letting them read Marx at West Point is going to destroy the military. It's the same bullshit you heard when people didn't want to integrate the genders in the military. It's the same bullshit you heard when they didn't want to allow Black soldiers in the military. It's the same old shit, okay? And it's racist, it's divisive, it's political, and it also, for the party and the people that talk about freedom all the time, why should one sector of the country not serve in the military, right? Like, there's one group of people who get a pass. They're okay with trans people having jobs and living life all around the world and voting. but they can't die for their country. In my view, America is supposed to be about equality and about freedom. And that means everybody has the right to get married, to drink what they want, and to die for their country if they want to, right? Because they want to show how much they love this country. You know, and there are all the other scientific data about how women can perform better physically in certain areas. All this stuff is so fucking tired and done. It was 30 years ago, right? But they think they have a pressure point here. And here's something about the military. The military can't hit back, okay? General Milley is busy fighting our wars, okay? People in active duty can't go on Fox in uniform and push back against Tucker Carlson. And then this was a real problem during Iraq when they couldn't speak up and say this is going in the wrong direction, or they were fearful about Trump. So it's incumbent upon us as thought leaders, as people in the public dialogue, to raise voices of the people who can speak, because Milley's got his hands tied behind his back. Even when he's testifying, he wants to say what he thinks, but he can't. And neither can over 1 million other people in the active duty. So for someone like Laura Ingraham or Tucker Carlson, they're a punching bag. They're really a punching bag that is just sitting up there, and they finally realize that they could just hammer on it, and there's no, you know, military news channel that can push back. And by default right now, it's MSNBC. So who would have planned that 20 years ago, that MSNBC was going to be the network defending the military and Fox was going to be the one attacking it? But that's where we are. And I think there's a really important point here. It divides our military. It divides our country. It impacts morale. It distracts us. It does all the things that Kim Jong-un and Putin would love to do. So thank you, Laura Ingraham. You're helping our enemies. Thank you, Matt Gaetz. You're helping our enemies.
The thing I don't understand is how Tucker Carlson or anybody, let's pick somebody on the left, some progressive who has never served in the military or seemingly done anything that requires courage. I mean, even like maybe sports or physical labor. Ted Cruz tweeting that and saying that we're turning the American military into pansies by trying to recruit LGBT people, I guess. And Tucker Carlson saying that Milley is not brave and is a pig. How does anybody in the military, even if you are a far right, conservative, whatever you want, you hear that and you say, you're saying that I'm not brave. I mean, you and I don't agree on our politics, but we're brave. Yeah. How can you say that? How do conservatives who support these guys and watch these guys and love watching them, and Fox News is always in the base, how do they react when they say that? Or when you hear that, you know, former President Donald Trump called these guys pussies and suckers and all that? How come that's not really offensive to everybody, regardless of their political background?
Well, it's not offensive to everybody because some people just can't be offended by this stuff, right? Like there's a reflection of the American public that exists in the military. Like I drove from Watkins Glens across the country, across the state this weekend. I saw 3 American flags flying in people's front yards. My wife still grew up on Long Island, is shocked by that. Okay, but people will fly Confederate flags in their front yards in New York State this weekend, right? And that is still a thing. People are going to
American flags. You saying you saw?
Sorry, Confederate. Did I say Confederate? Confederate flags.
You said it both. You saw Confederate flags.
Confederate flags. Sorry, I don't want to be that lady who got torched on MSNBC for saying too many flags on Long Island. Confederate flags in the front yard, usually next to a flag that said like "fuck Biden," which is like, oh, thank you, neighbor. My kid wants to see that every day, right? But like, there are people who are always down for this. Okay, there's a percentage of the country that's always going to watch Fox. That's always going to follow Trump. That is hardened. Hold on. That's hardened and calcified, right? And that exists in the military too. We can't kick them out because they believe that. But it's a long war. And they're losing more and more of the middle. That group is becoming smaller, more isolated, more calcified. And I do think we have to take a long view on this, right? This is going to hurt them with moderates in Pennsylvania. This is going to hurt them with Republicans in their own party. We just buried John Warner, the World War II veteran, right, who used to be married to Elizabeth Taylor. He served in World War II and in Korea. He's gone. Bob Dole's gone. John McCain's gone. But Trump started this. Trump attacked John McCain. He attacked the Khan family. He took money away from the Pentagon and sent it to the wall. He was politicizing the military to a level we'd never seen before. And Milley and others were pushing back from the inside. And that's part of this too. This is payback. This is Trump paying back Milley for pushing back on him. And it's coming out now in books and other things. He's going to make Milley pay for challenging him, just like he did to everyone else. And we've got to push back. We've got to focus on the long game and the middle, the people who aren't radicalized, the people who can be convinced, even if it's just one person, your grandfather or someone else in your extended family. maybe this will push them over the edge, and eventually you build a broader coalition and isolate them further. But this is like the new war on terrorism. We got to take a multi-decade approach and understand that some of these folks are just going to be hardened and potentially violent too. And that's got to be treated like the national security threat that it is. And that's why the president, the Pentagon, everyone else says domestic extremism from the right is the single most urgent threat to our national security. It's true. It's true. And Laura Ingraham is pouring fuel on that. And Donald Trump is pouring fuel on that. Yeah. And all it takes is one listener who says, you know what, Milley is an asshole. He takes a shot at him. Right? Like this is endangering the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. You're threatening him with your audience. That's crazy, right? That's crazy. Like the security protocols they have to go through with these people now is out of control. But it's a real thing, and they're making it worse.
I didn't want to interrupt that rant to correct you on something. You did, in fact, just kill Bob Dole. I mean, he's alive. He said he's gone.
I'm sorry. But he's gone from politics, right? Like he's gone from the politics. He's gone. Those kinds of moderates that were national security focused, right? George Bush, the first George Bush, right, was a World War II veteran. They're gone now, right? And what do you got instead? You got Dan Crenshaw, right? And you got people that are real. You got Pete Hegseth on Fox, right? Yeah. You got Eric Greitens, right? You've got some really right wing, and then you got Kinzinger and others that are more moderate, right? And then you've got Gallego over here and Tammy Duckworth. But there's this proxy war. But the Republican Party used to be the party of the military. And they were the party of the military, most of all, because they said it all the time. They just said, we love the military, and Democrats were all mixed up about it, so they didn't say it all the time. And then they had John Kerry, and that became all conflicted. But this is really cuts to the core of the identity of the party, and I think that's why this is dangerous for the GOP. I think they're going against their own base, and that's going to hurt them over time.
I mean, I'll just try to push back or split hairs with the Republican Party as the party of the military. The conservative movement was always believed in pretty much every war they ever saw. And
but if you test it, right, this is still true. If you test it in the public, and you say who's stronger on defense, right, and then you say like who's stronger on healthcare, it's going to be Democrats, right, or social issues, right, or education.
You're absolutely right about that, but it's bullshit. They're not stronger.
It may be bullshit. But the number one reason it's true in the population, in the popular opinion, is because Republicans say it all the time. Like Donald Trump, you say, I love the military, I love our veterans. You're right. Hillary didn't say it that much. And if you say it enough times, for many people, it becomes true. And now you've seen Biden and others, they recognize there's a populism there. There's maybe a potential voting block they can get, and they say it more. But especially like the Bill de Blasio era of Democrats, they don't know how to talk about this. They also don't know how to talk about cops and other people like that. And you see it blow up over and over again. That cuts to the core of like a 20-year leadership core of the Democratic Party that was really conflicted about Vietnam and didn't know how to move forward. And that cloud still remains. And people like Buttigieg and Tammy Duckworth and others are trying to change that. But it's going to take a while. Most 60, 70-year-olds will say the Republican Party is stronger on defense than Democrats.
I know, but I would simply say that the criticism that you're making is that, generally speaking, the progressive movement, Democrats have been more critical and questioning of military endeavors and of
hold on. But really? Like, then why is the AUMF still in place after 9/11? Right? Here's the ultimate blow up with that.
I can criticize all these.
That's the most important thing, though. This is where Democrats should shut the fuck up, really, because they allowed the president to fight never-ending wars with a blank check and no oversight.
But they didn't.
They did. The AUMF is still there.
Yes, but hold on. Nuance matters. It matters, and we should give credit to those who didn't. Many Democrats have been critical of that and didn't vote for it to renew it.
Did the Democratic Party get rid of the AUMF? Did they make it a priority? Have you ever heard about it in the mainstream media until this year?
I think the more important argument about that is where progressives have been on conflict and wars. And specifically, if you want to talk about the votes, the vast majority of Democrats did not vote to support authorizing invading Iraq.
They also didn't make it a priority to rescind the power that the president has to launch, like even Biden. Let's talk about it right now because it's not the same for everybody. They're okay with Biden launching strikes into Syria, except for a couple people. Where are they today? Where are they today saying, hey, if Trump went into Syria, if Trump started shooting rockets into Jordan or into Somalia, they'd say, hey, the president isn't authorized to do this. But with Biden, it's okay. Like it's got to be the same, especially around these issues. We need consistency from both parties. And just the point that everyone needs to know is we gave George Bush the right to invade and attack any country he wanted after 9/11.
Republicans did.
The Congress did. Many Democrats did as well.
Many Democrats did not.
But many Democrats did. Okay. And and they've had almost 20 years to make that a priority and fix it. Okay, and they didn't. Like, ask yourself your favorite Democrat. Pick your favorite Democrat and ask yourself when the last time you saw them do a press release on the AUMF was.
Chris Murphy constantly. Bernie Sanders. Lots of Democrats.
Not constantly. Bernie Sanders is not constantly talking about the AUMF.
Well, he is definitely against renewing it.
He didn't talk about it much on the presidential campaign when he was running for president.
We can absolutely talk about priorities. My original point before we started down this road was progressives don't follow blindly military endeavors. Never have. I disagree.
I think to make it by party line. Okay. Do you think that Joe Manchin does? How about Joe Manchin?
I'm not. You did. I said progressives. Ideology matters. And
definitions matter too. Like if you ask 100 Democrats what progressive means.
The far left has always been critical of American militarism and imperialism. Yes or no?
The far left since the beginning of history in America. I don't know. I'm not a historian.
In the last few generations.
Sure, and you could also argue that they've gone too far and they've been anti-military. Right? I met plenty of progressives who don't like the military and who are.
I would unpack anti-military. I'm of the far left, and I've never been anti-military, as you know.
But you know damn well that you and me and many others have been a part of educating the progressive wing of the party over the last 20 years. And this new generation has changed a bit more than the last generation. And the up-and-coming generation is totally different. Like this 17, 18, 19-year-olds, how they feel about the military now is very different. So it's really almost by like 10-year blocks. But the progressive wing of the Democratic Party has a very, let's say, complicated history with the American military over the last generation. And important to note, like the Democrats never elected a veteran. They got close with John Kerry, okay? But as president, right. But the Republicans had George Bush. They had candidates like John McCain. They continue to put candidates forward that are military, and they've talked about a lot.
George Bush was in the military.
I'm sorry?
George Bush was in the National Guard.
No, his father was shot down as a World War II pilot. You're talking about and he was in the military. I mean, granted, I'm not going to praise it.
But that's you now took this argument to 2 more minutes, which means I have to say, I really got into politics a lot more around that election, 2004, Kerry, Bush. And I'll never forget saying this to people. 2 men are running for the highest office of the land. Both of them are born with silver spoons in their mouth. Both of them born into wealth. One of them, who was born into wealth, volunteered for combat in a controversial war. The other got out of it. Who do you want to vote for?
I know.
Politics. I know. And Republicans supported the guy who escaped military service and tarnished and
that cuts to the core. That cuts to the core of my point. The Republicans were able to put out essentially a draft dodger against the war hero, but it also cuts to the core. The Democrats also couldn't get him elected, right? Like the Democrats had a hard time with John Kerry too. I was at that convention. I was there for the debates. I was there when they were going back and forth.
Military service, though, not because of his choice. Because
in part. So look, let's talk about Bob Kerry. Right? Did the Democrats have a good time with Bob Kerry's military service? Bob Kerry was running for president at one point.
Yeah.
Okay, he's a Medal of Honor recipient. He got run out of the party by the left wing and other parts of the Democratic Party, right? They were not comfortable with Bob Kerry's service. They were not comfortable with with the dirty parts of war and the messy parts of war. No, it's the same argument. It's the same argument. It's the same.
It was messy. He was not by any means probably qualified to be president because of his military past and some of the controversial things that he had done.
I disagree with that. I know Bob Kerry, and I disagree with that strongly.
Of course you do. But reasonable people can disagree on such things. You couldn't disagree on Kerry Bush.
But I think you are approaching this from where you sit, and I respect and understand that. But if you go out to Watkins Glen this weekend, okay, and you ask him John Kerry versus George Bush. You ask him Hillary Clinton against Donald Trump. The Democrats are losing the branding argument. That's my point. The Democrats can say they're strong on defense. They don't say it enough. They don't back it up. They don't elevate people who can make that case. Let's see who's going to push back against Dan Crenshaw today other than me. Let's see who's going to push back against Tucker Carlson other than you. Are they going to have a coordinated effort where they have Colin Powell out there and Admiral Mullen and other people, or is it going to be Nancy Pelosi making the argument?
I think you're wrong to say that they're not criticizing. I think that a lot of this messaging stuff I don't agree with you on, but I do have to get to 2 more important issues than this disagreement. If we even have time, I wanted to ask you about Afghanistan withdrawal and suicides. Let's just start with suicide, because I saw this statistic the other day. You've been on this issue forever. Nobody has done a better work, I think, than the organization that you founded and were former executive director of. That's why I learned a lot about it. That's why I talked to veterans who were sponsoring, the Clay Hunt bill, which you advocated for. Veteran suicide. This statistic I read last week, I suppose you knew this was inevitable. I guess I never really thought about it, but deaths of Iraq and Afghanistan era veterans have now, suicide deaths have exceeded combat deaths in those conflicts.
No doubt. No doubt.
Where are we today on that issue? I
appreciate
a terrific milestone.
I appreciate you bringing that up. And I always appreciate the battle and the discussion and your focus on these issues. Here's what everybody needs to know. Vietnam vets will tell you there could be 5-10 times the number of people who died from suicide and from Agent Orange that are names on the wall. This is not new, right? Like, Americans are surprised that more people die from suicide than in combat. We can't even count how many people die by suicide. We still don't even know definitively because they don't have it on death records, and there's not good accounting from the CDC on how people even die from suicide, die by suicide. So this is not surprising. A good friend of mine asked me yesterday, what's the legacy of this war? And I said to him, what's the number one issue for us? And I'm just reading a text I sent to him. And he said, is it burn pits? Is it suicide? I said, it's sadness. And I said, it's feeling like it was all for nothing. And it's going to be really bad when Afghanistan implodes. But if that's too existential, we can talk about burn pits. But that underscores something that impacted almost as many people as Agent Orange, and that we had to fight for, again, like Agent Orange. Like, it took us 20 years. It took them 50 years. And I think it shows how fucked up it all is, that we have to fight for it again, just like the Vietnam vets did. And I think the AUMF is still a big deal because, like, congrats, like, America gave so little of a shit about us that they let 3 presidents abuse the shit out of us and send us all around the world with no oversight for 2 decades. Like, that is the real shit, right? 2 decades, we got sent around the world to die, and Congress didn't really give a fuck enough to even check the money, to check, the power, to check the AUMF. Everybody can argue about how much they love you. But how much do you love us if right now there's a dude on the ground in Syria and America doesn't even know? Because there are probably people on the ground in Syria. And Congress lets that happen. So I think these are the bigger issues that are so relevant, and they impact suicide, burn pits, sexual assaults, all the other cascading elements. But the country never gave enough of a shit about us to even care where they were sending us. That's my no shit on today going into the summer, because I think we have to have this reckoning about how many people care and how many people vote, how many people say they love us and how many people do something about it. Because July 4th is coming. Save the fireworks and go support the burn pit legislation. To put your flag on the wall, leave it up there, and go pass Gillibrand's Military Justice Improvement Act to stop people from being sexually assaulted in the military. Stop with the bullshit talk. Stop messing around with Dan Crenshaw and focus on the real shit and help us get stuff done. Because we have gotten a lot done this year so far, and there's an opportunity to do much more with Biden guiding us in the right direction and focused on it. I'll give him credit on that. End of rant.
No, fine. I would say the left has cared a lot about those things that you said people don't care. I would say the left has cared about it and covered these issues and tried to get.
But why are you like a defender of the quote unquote left? Like, some people on the left, some people.
I'm an educated person.
But but you got to be educated enough to know that, like, some of your people suck too. Like, veterans suck, and I'm a veterans advocate. Like,
overwhelmingly, they don't. Overwhelmingly, they don't.
But some of them do. Like, there's plenty of veterans that you're going to see that are politicians now that have forgotten their oath and suck. Like, we got to move beyond this. Like, the left is great, the right is bad.
No,
like,
I disagree. I disagree. The anti-war movement is great. It's great.
Oh, I don't know about that. I mean, there's a lot. Yeah, that's like saying the pro-war movement is terrible.
It is. Yeah, it is. Like,
everybody in all of it is terrible. Like, people who thought Afghanistan is a good idea. And I got labeled as pro-war because I said Afghanistan was a good idea. And I got labeled as anti-war because I said Iraq was a stupid idea. So which am I? Am I pro-war or anti-war? Which one am I?
You and I are good friends, and it would be nuanced. I wouldn't label you as either. I wouldn't do that.
But there's a lot of people like us, Pete. There's more people like us that we need to elevate.
If we're going to shorthand the discussion, which we can right now, the anti-war left, if they had listened to the anti-war left, you wouldn't be having to say that we're sad. You wouldn't be. That war that you fought in Iraq was the worst foreign policy disaster in our generation. You know it, and I know it, and so do so many other veterans. And the anti-war left was a massive movement of normal people, not hippies.
Look, I was a part of it, okay? Yeah. But it's not homogenous, okay? And the people who failed us, okay, were on all sides. And you find me the champion of the AUMF reform. Who's the liberal lion who is always on AUMF? You know, it's like Vote Vets is out there occasionally on this. You know, occasionally Buttigieg used to talk about it. Occasionally some members of Congress would talk about it. Like, somebody out there is smart enough listening in your audience. They could do a global search of how many times Democratic presidential candidates for Congress brought up the AUMF. I think Buttigieg brought it up once, and like Tulsi Gabbard used to bring it up. Okay, like maybe that's the closest thing.
I will concede for sure that any criticism of that issue is a fair point because it's the constant authorization of never-ending war. I agree. But on the larger issues of the specific giant military interventions, overwhelmingly, it's been the moderate Democrats in Congress who have been against the war.
You just said moderates. You went from the progressives to moderates.
Yes, right? Because my point is, of course, the far left was, but I'm making the point to you that so was the moderates in Congress saying, and also more importantly, on the issues that you've taught me about and that your organization is getting the funding. You tell me who was more cooperative on getting the funding to take.
But that's because of ideology. Like, liberals are always going to be more loose with funding, and Republicans are always going to be more conservative. The real question, hold on. The real question is, who's really focused on oversight? Who's really focused on making sure? No, because that's important, and that's where the ultimate progressive, Bernie Sanders, failed. As chairman of the Senate Veterans Affairs Committee, we had the biggest VA scandal in history, and he was out there apologizing for the VA and arguing with me and others that it wasn't really a problem. It was some kind of right-wing conspiracy, and the VA wasn't having all these issues. Plenty of progressives fell asleep on the watch, including Barack Obama.
Agreed.
Barack Obama's legacy is a VA that could have been turned around that he totally fucked up.
Let me try to minimize it as much as possible, make it as binary as possible, and see if you buy it. And then I'll ask you Afghanistan, and then I'll say goodbye. I'm going to minimize it and make it as binary as possible. You tell me if this is if there's anything.
Which I resist on principle.
Fair enough.
Okay.
But I have to get huge ratings.
You don't. That's why I'm trying to push you, Pete. You don't have to. You got a great audience that will stick around for a real debate.
Here it is. Here we go.
Yeah.
Conservative Republicans have been for every military intervention and conflict. They're so wrapped up with money and politics in the military industrial complex. They support every war and don't support the veterans' health care when they come home. Democrats are generally against these wars and do support the veterans when they come home. I think that binary.
What do you want me to say? What do you want me to say that? There are plenty of conservatives. There are plenty of conservatives who are right-wing conservatives. Hold on. Who came out against the Iraq War, and they've talked about it endlessly, how they were right about that decision. Hold on. And there's plenty of people like Hillary Clinton that voted for the war and regretted their vote, right? Like, the generalities help no one. Let's talk about a specific member of Congress and their voting record. Let's talk about
generalities about Congress and different. Let's talk about leadership.
Let's talk about leadership and priorities, and someone like Schumer who can dictate the priorities for his party, right? And he can say AUMF is number 2, or he can make AUMF number 11, right? And people like. Pick an individual member of Congress. Pick Bernie Sanders, and we can explore his voting record over time. Bernie Sanders is a great example. If you were progressive, you couldn't have been happy with hearing him talk about Afghanistan over time, because he started to go way out into moderate land on Afghanistan over time, just like he does on guns, right? There's certain issues where Bernie Sanders you have to look at as an individual case, because most people probably think he's over here on defense all the time, and he's not. Right? Like, sometimes he comes over here and then he goes back because he's a politician. So I think the really constructive conversation is to have about individual policies, people, voting records, issues, and not talking generalities, because that's what Fox does. That's what MSNBC
you did. But you've been talking in general. George W. Bush destroyed an entire generation of the military, their families, and a foreign country. Barack Obama and his wife, Michelle Obama, came in and advocated and did everything they could.
And didn't end the war either. He said he was going to end it, and he didn't end it. He played games with it, too. How many troops are in Iraq right now, Pete?
I don't know. What, 3,000?
3,000. 3,000. Yeah. Right? How many Americans do you think know we have 3,000 troops?
Heavily criticized by the right for withdrawing from Iraq.
But they're still there. We had 8 years of Barack Obama.
All I'm saying is progressives are way better for veterans.
It's not binary. It's not binary. And I think you have to hold your people accountable. If you're going to say George Bush, I'm not going to be the guy who always says Barack Obama every time you say George Bush. It doesn't get us anywhere. But I think if you want to move these issues forward, you have to call your own out. And there are plenty of people in the Democratic Party who can do better on these issues, who failed all of us. I think that Obama's legacy, one of Obama's really terrible legacies, okay, his failure to fix the VA, which could have been the ultimate case for progressivism, right? Fix the VA, show how the VA works. That's how government works. It's the GI Bill, free healthcare for all. That's your case study, okay, on the whole theory of progressivism. They blew that, okay?
And Republicans would not let him do it. You know the resistance came from the Republican Senate on that issue.
I'm not even going to entertain the republicans won't let me do a thing. Look, you have political capital. You choose to spend it where you want. Okay, leaders make choices based off limited options. Okay, and I'll go back to it again. All the people who are going to come after me because they hate that I'm not progressive enough or I'm look at the AUMF. How many of you have even heard of the AUMF before we had this conversation? How many of you have ever read about it? And if you haven't, that's my homework for you. Read about the AUMF. Ask every progressive you care about to push for this, so that if you really care about never-ending wars and stopping sending people all around the world, that's your bullseye. That's the place to focus. Because right now, 3 presidents have had carte blanche to send people wherever the fuck they want, including Syria over the weekend.
The anti-war left knows so much more about the AUMF than anybody in the middle or on the right. Always has.
You're smarter than a statement like that, Pete. I love you too much to let you make blanket statements.
Find me all the books and all the columns. Make the case with anybody you want. There are those, what are they, libertarians, your Rand Pauls, and a couple of others, but that's generally all there is. The anti-war left has always been critical of the AUMF before anybody on the right ever was. I think that's a profoundly easy case to make, but I will concede as always to you, sir, if I am wrong on that and anything else. And you should know, a lot of people listen to this podcast when we argue, agree with you and not me, which is upsetting.
Now, it's not about agreement. Here's my thing, and this is no shit. I want to add light to contrast the heat. You and I get into it. We love each other. I learn from you. You learn from me. And hopefully everybody learned a little bit of something, more than they knew 20 minutes ago. That's what I think we need more of.
Always.
So I appreciate you doing that. And I hope everyone, this 4th of July coming up, learn about the AUMF, learn about burn pits, learn about the fact that tens of thousands of troops are being sexually assaulted in our military. If you care about our national defense, help them stop being sexually assaulted. Right? That's happening. And those are things hopefully we can all agree on. Focus on that instead of what Matt Gaetz said while we were on the air. Focus on that instead of Tucker Carlson.
And that's never, ever again send our American men and women volunteers into conflicts they shouldn't be in and that they cannot win.
And cargo shorts for everybody.
No, I disagree. You and I have moved on. We've moved on. Paul Rieckhoff, thank you very much.
My friend, I appreciate you. Happy summer to your amazing audience. Thank you all for all the support.